Hello, everyone. I'm Dijon,
And I'm Aiara.
and welcome to the Mustard Cast, the podcast about the art of storytelling and how it's used across different mediums. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see our channel grow, and to click the notification bell so that you're notified when we post. Uh, as usual, free Palestine. Do whatever you can to support them. Happy New Year's, everyone. Um, this is our first episode of the year, and for the first episode, we have a very special episode with a special guest, Matt Firor. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm obviously Matt Firor. I'm the head of Zenimax Online Studios. So we're a Baltimore-based uh, video game developer, best known for developing and running the Elder Scrolls Online. So I was the guy that Bethesda Softworks hired to start ZeniMax Online back in 2007 and start the project that became ESO, and I've been there ever since.
Great. So we like to start the podcast talking about just any media we've been interacting with lately, any movies, TV shows been watching, books we're reading, music we listen to, games we're playing. Just a very quick rundown of anything we've been playing around with. Nothing super long. And
Wow,
yeah,
I read a lot of books. I'm actually right now reading Titan, the Ron Chernow biography of John D. Rockefeller and the beginning of the American capitalist system. So it's a very interesting and timely book. For video games, I just finished the new Indiana Jones game
mm,
from Bethesda and Machine Games, which is awesome, and I totally wholeheartedly recommend it to everyone who wants to play it.
yeah, I've been playing it as well. And I last episode we which released last week. I talked about how the when I first played it, I wasn't feeling it, and I think I just at the time I wasn't in the mood for that type of game. I don't know, just at that moment when I started playing it, it just wasn't what I was expecting. So it kind of threw me off. So I didn't know how to feel about it. But since during the holiday break, I've played it a lot more. I'm enjoying it way more, and I've really started getting into it, and I'm liking it a lot at the moment.
Yeah, it's great, and it's from Bethesda, right? It's by Machine Games, which
Mm.
who I have known those guys forever, and it's executive produced by Todd Howard, who I've known forever, and so I got to play it a little bit during its development, but it's legit, it's really good, and it's a totally different style of gameplay than a lot of games have these
Yeah,
days. It very much matches the Indiana Jones kind of IP and vibe, and it's really really good. It's a great story above everything else.
yeah, the story's been really fun so far. I think a lot of people, especially myself, was going in kind of comparing it to something like Uncharted, or Tomb Raider, games that have clearly taken inspiration from the Indiana Jones franchise. So when I first played it and it wasn't like that, I was a little confused and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. But as I got more into it, I was like, you know what? I see what they're going for, and I understand why they want to be different and not just do what other
Yeah,
people have done before. And yeah, as I played it more, I I started enjoying it a lot more. And admittedly, I was a little down on it last episode.
uh-oh.
My opinion is different though. I'm not just saying that because you're here, but like I really
Feel
have.
free to correct the record.
Yeah, no, I really do actually like it a lot more than I liked it when I talked about it last episode.
Yeah. It's funny, you can play it two ways. You can play it kind of like a movie where you just go through the story, but then you can also play it like an adventure game where you go search for every possible secret and
Mm,
every possible. And I played it straight through with a little bit of side exploration, but uh, the design lets you go back to areas that you've already been through. And so now that I'm done the story, I might actually go back and start to look for all the secret passages and all the RPG type stuff, which I love. And the lore in it's awesome, and the history's awesome. And so I'll be playing it a little more, I think.
yeah, I've been trying to do as much of the like side stuff as I can. I think I made a mistake and progressed the story when I didn't mean to, but I think I'll be able to go back. So
You can.
yeah, I want to go back and get some of the stuff that I missed. Um, but yeah, you have anything else or that you've been
Nah,
putting
that's
on this
that,
one?
that. Those two things have pretty much taken up my time the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Harry, you want to say what media you've been interacting
Yeah, I can say. Been because of the break, I've been able to like catch up on a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to do. So I've been playing a lot more Bloodborne and really liking it. I'm terrible at Souls like games, but Bloodborne is fun and I like like the system. I like the world. I like all the stuff that's going on in it. I've been playing a lot of Neutopia recently, surprisingly. I don't know, I just got like the inkling to get back on my Switch and start playing video games. So I've been doing that. I've been doing another playthrough of Nier Automata just for the kicks and giggles. What else? Oh, I've been playing Castlevania, like a whole bunch of I've been doing like a Castlevania marathon from start to finish, like in order. Because the new season's coming out, so I'm like, I want to play all of them.
Me and you have
I'm
a
at Lord's.
similar
Yep.
minds because I also rewatched Nocturne the first season in anticipation for the second season that's coming out on the 13th. So we'll definitely have a lot to talk about Castlevania
for
next
sure.
episode.
I've been meaning to rewatch Nocturne. I just haven't gotten around to it. Right now, game wise, I'm at Lords of Shadow, I think, and it's a game.
Yeah, I plan on playing it eventually. It's one of the many like God of War clones of that PS3 era.
Yeah, it's not a bad game, but it's definitely not what I was expecting. Doubly so because like I'm coming from like the Metroidvania or like side scroller Castlevanias, but it's not bad. I think I just need to get more into it. Outside of video games, though, let me think. What movies? I don't think I have watched any movies recently. Nothing's really piqued my interest. I'm too scared to go watch Nosferatu, and I didn't get to go see Sonic, so I'm kind of like out of the loop on movies. But I might go see them in the future. We'll see. And manga. Still reading Chainsaw Man, still liking Chainsaw Man a lot now that I'm like back into it properly. Little bit of Claymore. I've been Dandadan is on my list like to read the actual manga before the rest of the anime comes out. Just haven't gotten around to it because Chainsaw Man and stuff. But other than that, I think that's all I've got. Mostly played video games over the break.
Yeah, I saw Nosferatu Christmas Day, 10:30 at night. So by the time I left, it was the next day. But yeah, it was real good. It was great. It's not that scary, but I don't know necessarily what constitutes scary for you, Aiara, but to me, it wasn't that scary. It's definitely horrible. It's creepy, but it's not super scary. It's very fun. It was a very beautiful movie. It's great. I love it. I'm probably gonna try and see it again before our next episode where we'll give like a full review. But yeah, it's real good. If you can manage to see it before, then that'd be great. It's a good movie.
Yeah, I'll try. It's like I my relationship with horror movies is complicated because I get scared really easily. And it's like it's not like a game where you can just like turn it off. Like you have to sit there and you have to watch the rest. And I'm like, that's a lot. But I will try. And if I get scared, I will talk about it on the podcast for content.
So I've been reading The Witcher. I think Blood of Elves. And Mistborn, the second book, which is Well of Ascension. And I ran through the first Mistborn book. And like had stopped reading The Witcher to read that. So I started reading The Witcher again, but then I stopped reading it and just started reading the second Mistborn book because Mistborn is so good. But I have to try to go back and forth between them so I can actually finish up The Witcher Blood of Elves. In terms of games, I mentioned Indiana Jones. I'm also playing, just before you hopped on, Matt, me and I were talking about Hades. I've been playing the first one, despite the fact that I'm also in the middle of playing the second one, the early access. I just randomly got the inkling to play the first one again, especially since I beat the main story, but there's like a true ending and there's like some side quest stuff to do. I haven't reconnected Orpheus and Eurydice yet, so I'm still working towards that. So I'm still playing that a little bit. The big one that I'm playing a lot of is Persona 3. I've been playing that game for almost a year at this point. That game is a lot. RPGs are just it's so long. I'm like 74 hours in, and I'm finally close to finishing it, but it's a lot of game. But I'm starting to understand the systems a lot more, and I think as a result enjoying it more than I did initially. But there was also Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out the month after Persona 3, so I stopped playing Persona 3 and just played that game for like 2-3 months. So that definitely contributed to the fact that, despite the fact that game came out last February, I'm still playing it now in January. But last for me is I finished up Superman the Animated Series, watched it when I was a kid, but I never saw all of it. So I decided to rewatch the episodes I've seen and watch it in its entirety. Unfortunately, right now, WB is removing every cartoon ever from Max, and it sucks. Um, and luckily, I finished S-Task because that's probably going to be on their list of cartoons to remove. I put Wizard Batman Beyond, Batman Brave and Bold, and my the Blu-rays in my Amazon cart because I'm like, I haven't finished those yet. It's only a matter of time before those get removed because they're removing so many cartoons. They remove Static Shock, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna have to get those Blu-rays because I'm probably not gonna be able to watch them on Max anytime soon. It's very sad that WB is making these very strange decisions to remove all their content from the streaming service that people buy to view their content. So, specifically animation, but yeah, that's a discussion for another episode. We've talked about it a lot over the course of the months. But moving on to you, Matt. I want to just start off learning about like how did you get into video game development? Like, what was your start?
Yeah, there's a 10-minute version of that and a whole GDC presentation version of that. But so obviously I'm older. I'm old enough to have been around when the game industry as we know it today was basically forming. So although I have a slightly different path than most people my age that are in the industry, because most of I don't want to generalize, but many of the people who are my age that are in the game industry started out making console, like mid 80s, late 80s type console games and PC games. I actually started making multiplayer games in the 1980s. So, which means you were on a dial-up BBS. It was pre-internet, so you could get maybe up to 8 people on one server at a time, and there were what are now called, or even then called, MUDs that were on university type systems where the internet or the proto internet was actually running. I actually didn't make or work on those. We worked on a commercial game that me and my friends were hooked on in the mid 80s when I went to George Washington University in DC. And there was a game service there called Scepter of Goth. And it was a licensed game from a guy in Minnesota who wrote this game that ran on an IBM XT, and you could call in up to 8 people, I think, could play at a time. During the day, it was like $2 an hour to play. This is how they worked, but at night it was cheaper. And so we spent so much money on that, me and this group of friends, that we decided to license our own version of that game. And we contacted the company and got a license to put one of these game systems in Atlanta, where one of the 4 of us was going to college. And that deal fell through because the company was going out of business. And so we got our money back, and then we decided, all right, how hard can this be, right? We'll just write our own. It was all text. It was a text-based multiplayer game where you could PvP and adventure together. And so we decided just to write our own because nobody told us we couldn't do it. And there was no internet there to tell us how to do it. We didn't even know that MUDs existed because there was no way for us to actually search for multiplayer games. So we just sat down and remembered how this game worked. And one of us was a very good programmer, and the other, 2 of us were very good programmers, and the other 2 were me and the 4th guy were pretty good at storytelling. So over 2 or 3 years, we wrote our own multiplayer gaming, text-based gaming system, and it came out, I think, in 1990. We launched. It was in Fairfax, Virginia, where the server was based in my friend Rob's townhouse. And to get multiplayer, then he had to get the phone company to install 7 phone lines in his house and have 7 modems stacked up in a stack, and have a phone number that if one line was busy, it automatically rolled over to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. So you just called one number and the modem answered, and then you could play together. So through various permutations, we formed a company, and then that company merged with another company, and eventually it all became Mythic Entertainment, which was in Fairfax, Virginia. And that game that we worked on that launched in 1990 or 91 became the server for Dark Age of Camelot, which was one of the OG MMOs that two of us in that original four worked on, and it became a worldwide best-selling game in 2001, and that was really when I got my start into the big times. In that time in between 1994, 95, and when Dark Age of Camelot came out, we actually made like 12 other games that were all multiplayer, first-person shooters, text-based role-playing games, just whoever would pay us to make a game. And we ran on America Online and a couple other online game services at the time as the internet was starting. So basically, my entry into the industry was being lucky enough to make multiplayer games at a time when the internet was just getting started, and that's really how it happened.
Yeah, no, I was doing some research, and I've always heard Dark Age of Camelot, and when I saw that you worked on it, I was like, this is an opportunity for me to learn a lot more about it.
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, learning that like you've been working on MMORPG since essentially they started was
Yep.
very, very interesting. Only recently have I started really getting into playing multiplayer games, because when I was a kid, we just didn't have access to internet a lot, because we just couldn't afford it. So I mostly played single player games with and when I played multiplayer, it was you know in a room with my siblings or my friends, or split screen stuff like that. And only recently, like it was like after I graduated high school in 2019 that I was finally in a place where I had internet all the time. And only in the past few years have I started playing more multiplayer games. Like currently, I'm playing Marvel Rivals almost every night. That game is really fun. Hero shooter with Marvel characters. I love comic books. I love those characters.
Yep.
I never got into Overwatch because that was during a time when I wasn't playing multiplayer games. I imagine that if I was playing multiplayer games back then, I probably would have played Overwatch, based on how much I love Rivals currently. So it's very interesting to learn about just like the early days of online gaming and what that was like. And my research is that the Dark Age of Camelot was originally going to be a sequel of a text-based multiplayer game.
Wow. Yeah, it's true. It's funny you know that. I didn't even know that information was out there. Yeah, we had so the game that we launched with, this text-based game that I was talking about in the very early 90s, 90 or 91, was called Tempest, and then we got a cease and desist letter from the company that owned the arcade game Tempest. I don't know how they found out us about it. We made like $50 off this game. It was not super successful at the time. So we renamed it Darkness Falls because that was the name of one of the areas in the game. And then Darkness Falls actually turned into a 3-sided PvP text game that launched on America Online. Still text only, although it had a little graphical front end. So it wasn't just streaming text. It had it segregated the text into different areas so it looked like a game. And then we all were playing EverQuest like around the clock when it came out in 1999. And we had another moment where we looked at each other like, all right, how hard can this be? We already have a game engine. We have the text-based game. And we had a 3D accelerated first-person shooter called Spellbinder. It was actually pretty big in Germany at the time. Deutsche Telekom, I think, hosted that. And so we took the we took the 3D accelerated engine from client from Spellbinder and just use the Darkness Falls server as the server, and that was the genesis of Dark Age of Camelot. But yeah, before we hit on using the Arthurian legends as a public domain IP, we were making it Darkness Falls 2 or Darkness Falls 3D or something appropriately Y2K sounding. And then we were like, okay, we don't have a hook, right? We're a very small company. We were like 28 people when Camelot launched, 28 developers. And then, so the president of the company, Mark Jacobs at the time, had the idea, thank God, of using, Disney style, using OG myths and legends to make a product. And people had heard of King Arthur, of course. So we had a 3-sided PvP system in Dark Age of Camelot with the King Arthur, knights in one team and the Viking legends in another team, and then Celtic Irish lore as the third team. And that actually was a stroke of genius because King Arthur is kind of well known in America, but boy, you go to England and France and Europe, and it's huge, right? It's part of their national identity in a lot of places. So Camelot did really well in Europe, and so much of our success came from there. But yes, it did start out as Darkness Falls 3D, and then morphed into Dark Age of Camelot. That was all pre-release, obviously. The public never knew that it was another name.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you worked on some other multiplayer games like in between that, and you mentioned like a first-person shooter and many other things. What other like multiplayer games have you kind of worked on before?
Yeah, this was before Camelot, so it was like
Before Camelot.
1995 to 2001. Yeah, we had. So we went through a phase where we did a lot of Hollywood movie multiplayer games. So we made Godzilla Online, Starship Troopers Online, Aliens Online, the Aliens license. That was a lot of fun, and that game actually was very few people played it, but it was very influential because it had you were 4-person fire teams, and you could see a little camera view of what your teammates were seeing. Which this is like 1998, right? This is extremely cutting edge technology, and it had voice chat, which again, 1998, extremely cutting edge technology. So that was pretty cool. You can actually go out, I think, even now on the YouTube and find videos of Aliens Online, and it's appropriately pixelated, 1998 looking, but there were a lot of great ideas there. And there's a role playing system that I think is still around called Rollmaster. And we had the Rollmaster license for a while, so we made 2 first-person shooters based on it was just one called Rollmaster Mage Storm that was very much a shooter with territorial. You know, you went and took territory and held it, and then you with win conditions. So very much presaging the Call of Duty and kind of strategic shooters in the of the 10 or 15 years after that. So that was pretty cool. And that Mage Storm then turned into Spellbinder, which was our 3D accelerated game, and that was the one that was pretty successful in Germany, and a lot of people played it. I go to European game shows a lot even today, and I run into people that knew. Obviously, they know Camelot, but they also tell me how much they loved Spellbinder, which was pretty funny because not that many people played it. But yeah, it was good. So yeah, a lot of different types of games, a lot of different. We were very small company for most of the 90s. We were 10 or 15 or 20 people because that's how it was back then, and we just pumped out little games that allowed you to, not only fight against people on the internet, but also co-op. So it was a wild west back then. So every game was introducing new ideas, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's hearing you bring up all these games. I'm thinking about all the games that are out now that have kind of like built off of those. Like of course there's a actual Alien Fireteam game that's out currently.
Yep.
But then Helldivers is also basically a Starship Troopers game. And also the upcoming, it's not multiplayer, but Avowed is, first person fantasy shooter. A lot of influence there.
Yeah, I think most of our games, for those people that played them, were very much, if they took anything away from it, it was the multiplayer systems that went with it. So, we did very strong co-op games, which were kind of back then. It was like LAN parties and literally just Quake style frag fests, and like there wasn't a lot of strategy in the games. But like Rollmaster Mage Storm had 4 different archetype characters, one of whom was just defense, and one was just offense, and one was a mix, and one was stealth, right? And you had to put all of them together to make a compelling team, that could go out. So a little more looking forward to things like Overwatch and things like that. But again, these are very small, very cheap to produce games that ran on like America Online, and so they never had a huge audience, but I think it captured enough budding game designers that they started to take ideas from that. And certainly Dark Age of Camelot was very influential on a whole generation of multiplayer game designers. I've heard that a lot at shows, and people ping me about it all the time.
Yeah, I'm curious. What games inspired you? Like, what multiplayer games may have inspired like Dark Age of Camelot or any of the games you've
Well,
worked on?
well, there weren't that many back then, but no, EverQuest certainly was the big one for. I mean, Camelot came out in 2001, and we started working on it, I think, in 1999. So you got to think about the online games in 1999. Like, there weren't very many. I mean, Ultima Online, of course, big ones. Ultima Online, um, EverQuest, obviously. Star Siege Tribes was very big. Um, oh God, what was the first Bungie game called? The very first one that was almost real time strategy. I am having an old man moment, but that game was super popular, and really it was a totally different game style, but it was very much um, an influence on the PvP systems that were in Dark Age of Camelot.
Are there like, I mean, you mentioned like Arthurian legends, and using that since it was in the public access, like any stories, outside of video games that inspired, um, Dark Age of Camelot.
Yeah, so certainly we made no secret that we embedded a lot of Monty Python and the Holy Grail references in Dark Age of Camelot. But really, the Arthurian legends were big, but it was just as much Viking, myths and Celtic lore. So, all of us, of course, were into mythology and appropriately geeky fantasy stuff back then. So, I mean, we'd all played Dungeons and Dragons. We all played tabletop role playing games. This is a long time ago, though. It was like D&D 3. I'm trying to think. It was a long time ago. So, but I think mostly we stuck pretty much to the Arthurian legends. Although obviously it's the Dark Age of Camelot, so we set it after King Arthur died, and what happened to to Albion after that. And so we took the story kind of into a new direction, because we didn't want to tell the same old story of Lancelot and Guinevere and Arthur and Mordred. We just wanted to go kind of in a new direction. And so we did that. But it was not a super story driven game. There were a lot of cool quests and exploration and things like that, but its PvP system is what it's mostly remembered for at this point.
Yeah, I'm curious how you're, because me and you have some similar game tastes, but I feel like for the most part, it's very different. Um, do you have a lot of experience with MMOs?
Um, yes, on and off, but like I'm not as into them as I was when I was younger, but like I want to say 14, 15-year-old Aiara was like super into MMOs. Like I was a Maple Story player.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't get into them as much as I do anymore because I don't have the time. But like I've had my eye on like Final Fantasy, I think 14 it is the one that's the MMO. I've been wanting to get back into them because I miss my Maple Story days and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm an MMO enjoyer. You mentioned EverQuest, Matt, and that was a deep cut for me because I didn't get to play it much because it was way before my time. But like, definitely a big fan of it, and it definitely looked very cool.
It's still out there. You can
it?
still play it. Oh yeah. These games never die. You can still play Dark Age Camelot. Like it's yeah. It's as long as there's a community out there playing them, they keep the servers running.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the only MMO that I played, there was this MMO that I used to go to the library to play, called Adventure Quest. That was that you played through the browser. That was really fun. That I played a lot when I was a kid, and that's like one of my few experiences with MMOs specifically, when it comes to multiplayer games.
I know the name, but I don't know the game at all.
Yeah, it's definitely like one of those like MMOs for kids type games. I played a lot when I was younger.
But if you two are looking to get into an MMO, I highly recommend Elder Scrolls Online. I think it's a good. Obviously, I have to say that, but I actually agree. It's a super good MMO for people that have never played MMOs. To the point that we almost never refer to it as MMO because it comes with all the baggage of EverQuest and World of Warcraft and kind of force group dynamics and things like that. And ESO doesn't have any of those. So If you just want to dip your toe into the water and play a game with other people, but also play solo if you want, it's the game for you.
Yeah, I just have been meaning to just get into Elder Scroll in general. Like Skyrim it's everywhere. I can play it anywhere I want to because it's been released 1,000 times, but I just
I
haven't gotten
cannot
around to it
recommend
yet.
Skyrim enough. If you have never played
I
it,
know I
it
like
is
it. I just haven't gotten around to it.
You would
Yeah.
really like it. Like, I love Skyrim. I love
yeah,
Skyrim to pieces. It's so fun.
literally one of the best games of all time. Like it's unbelievably good.
Yeah, open world RPG immersive sim is just like everything about it is
Yeah,
is my style of game. Like I love the Dishonored games. It's why I'm enjoying Indiana Jones so much. Because after I finally kind of just accepted that it's more of a kind of like immersive sim style game versus
yeah,
kind of the more Uncharted Tomb Raider style I was expecting, I kind of just I started really getting into it because I do like those style of games. I just had to. The term I used a lot in the last episode was there was a extreme case of little narrative dissonance that I had where I just to me the things didn't match in my brain, so my like I just it kept distracting me. But once I kind of got past that, I really started having a lot of fun because yeah, those type of games are some of my favorite. Dishonored 2 is one of my favorite games that I've ever played. I've played it so many
yeah.
times.
Yeah, it's Dishonored. I mean, all of Dishonored one, mostly because it was the first one,
Mm.
is my favorite of the two. But yeah, they're both great games. And if you want to play a cool RP, the the Dishonored games are immersive sims, but they're shooter mechanics essentially. I mean, you can sneak around and you can, but if you want to play an RPG style version of those games, you should play Prey, the 2016
Yeah,
Prey
that's
by
also
Arkane,
that's on my
because that
list.
game is a sleeper. It's awesome, and it's it's super deep, and it has mechanics that let you build things with the environment, and it's really cool. It's also super creepy, which is great, but it's a great game.
Yeah, that's been on my list too. I just love Arcane. I'm excited to see what they'll do with Blade. Um, because I talk about like Marvel Rivals. I like Marvel. I like comics, and combining one of my favorite studios and their style of gameplay with a superhero that I really like is going to be real exciting. I'm excited for whenever they show us more of that. But yeah, I was gonna say that like Aiara mentioned that they're replaying um near for like the 100th time.
Yeah,
That's me with Dishonored because there's just so many ways to play that game that I always find a reason to sit down and play it again. Like I think it was earlier this year. Like literally in not it's a new year, not earlier this year, earlier last year. It was like January last year. I played do Dishonored 2 for like the third or fourth time, but I decided I never played those games trying to be like non-lethal. I kind of just played
yeah.
to just do whatever. But for the first time, I was like, let me do this without killing anybody. There were some accidental deaths. I don't claim to have killed either of those people. Somehow it happened. There are two people that I didn't mean to kill them. It happened, and I couldn't undo it. But there's a third death that was in my counter at the end. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what happened. Someone died somehow through some like Rube Goldberg machine of things that I did that I don't know what happened. It's that game. A lot of systems interact with each other that can cause very random things to happen by accident. It's a really fun game. So moving on to like Elder Scroll and the creation of that. So what was that process like? Like starting a team like that?
Yeah, so I left Mythic in 2006, and then in 2007, Bethesda approached me, and we're like, basically, this was a long time ago. So in 2007, remember, Oblivion had launched year and a half before. Is before Fallout 3, and WoW was really starting to pick up steam. WoW launched, I think, in 2004. So Bethesda's like, we got this great fantasy IP. We just made this number one selling game of the year, critical hit, Oblivion. We want you to make an Elder Scrolls MMO. Do for Elder Scrolls what WoW did for Warcraft. And so um, basically, and they're like, I would, I had experience doing it with Camelot, and I was in the area, so I was in the DC Baltimore area. Basically, is where my whole career has been. So I founded the studio in Hunt Valley, which is just north of Baltimore for people that don't know that. And I did that in 2007. I worked for the first 3 or 4 months down in Bethesda at the Bethesda headquarters with Todd Howard's team, and basically he and I and the lead designers at the time laid out what era in Elder Scrolls that ESO would be, kind of the rules of engagement, because it's a huge IP, what we could approach, what we couldn't approach. They weren't necessarily thinking about Skyrim in that moment, but they knew they were making another Elder Scrolls game. We had to be sure that we kept out of that timeline. So, which we did. And then after those 3 or 4 months, I went up to Hunt Valley, started the studio, and then we started to work on the game. So, which was mostly the first couple of years recruiting the right people, finding the right technology, figuring out what kind of game it would be, and then we went from there. I actually gave a whole presentation at GDC last year, so 6, 8, 10 months ago, whenever it was, last March, on kind of that process, on what the process was like, to take Elder Scrolls from an Oblivion-based WoW-style MMO and then have Skyrim launch before us, and it being one of the best games of all time and all the expectations that come with that, and how we had to change ESO pre-launch to match more the Skyrim style of gameplay than the more WoW, Dark Age Camelot style gameplay that we had before. And so, everyone forgot about Oblivion the minute Skyrim launched, and Oblivion was kind of our lodestar there for a lot of the development of ESO, and we had to scramble to change. And we did. We were partially successful, but over time we worked out the kinks, and then it became really, and still is, a game that people can play Skyrim and Oblivion and the Fallout games, and then they can just kind of get into ESO, and the controller layout similar, and if you're playing with the controller, and the world feels familiar to all Elder Scrolls players. The characters are similar. The interacting with NPCs is familiar, and the stories are still hallmark Elder Scrolls. Kind of political, world-changing type situations.
So what was the biggest changes that was made during that time and to the gameplay? And
wow, yeah,
comparison
and
to
that's a good question.
Oblivion versus Skyrim.
I have a slide from that GDC presentation, and it's like literally the slide is just words all the way down, like in columns of all the things, of all the systems that we changed because of Skyrim. But I think the biggest one, in terms of production, was we did voice acting for every quest, which is huge because there are a million words in ESO, and so just getting like whatever it was, 97 voice actors to voice 400 characters, and all of it. It was production wise, it was a very intensive process. But gameplay wise, we went from third person only tab style targeting like you would see in Camelot or World of Warcraft or EverQuest or any of the Gen 1 or 2 MMOs. We went to a more third or first person style where more, I'm not going to say shooter style, but you didn't have to have a player tab targeted to hit them. You can just actually be in range and just put them in the middle of your screen on the reticle and swing your sword and you'll hit them, much more like Skyrim. So that changed. The whole combat system changed because of that, obviously. The art style changed. We had to make it much more gritty and realistic and Skyrim looking than the more exaggerated, I'm not going to say WoW style, but more WoW style than Skyrim style than it was before. And we've released some screenshots of what it used to look like in there. You can tell it looks like a 2007 fantasy game in the screenshots and not like the 2014 game that launched. And that was because of the Skyrim art style's influence. So a whole bunch of things changed.
So I don't remember exactly when. It was sometime over the pandemic. The way I play games changed. I think it just happened to be the fact that my life just changed, not just because of the pandemic. It just was that I graduated high school just before the pandemic, 2019, and then started college, dropped out, and a lot of stuff happened during that time, and the way I played games changed along with the way that my life changed, and I feel like I'm a much more patient gamer. So like back when I was younger, games like Skyrim, I had no interest in because it's just this this big open RPG. RPGs especially, I just was not into when I was younger. I just couldn't get into them because it was just too much, and I didn't want to play games that big that long. But more recently, I'm a lot more patient with games, and it's why I've been playing Persona 3 for like almost a year because I know where to take breaks and how to pace myself with these bigger, more open games, and how to figure out how to find figure out how to like them if I want to like them, or of course if I don't, I'll stop playing them. But I have a lot more patience to see where the story will take me, and if it'll get to a point where I'll enjoy the game. And I've been replaying Red Dead Redemption 2 recently, and I played it back in 2018 when it came out. But I didn't do most of the side quests because I was just kind of mainlining it, and just any random thing that might have distracted me, I would do that. But I was doing the main story a lot of the time. But now I'm taking my time. I'm like hunting animals and like kind of really getting immersed in the very kind of slow paced gameplay that game has. That isn't for everybody. And I guess I'm wondering, like, Skyrim has a lot of that in terms of like being a big open game where you really immerse yourself into the world. How do you translate that to a multiplayer game where there's dozens of people, trying to do the exact same thing?
Yeah, and for the record, you can play Skyrim by just going straight through the main story.
Yeah,
Like, nothing wrong. There's no wrong way to play it.
yeah, no, for sure.
And ESO's kind of similar, although we have a ton of main stories by this point. But really, we did a couple of game designery things, like on certain steps of certain quests. It's a solo instance, so you don't see other players when you're in it, just to preserve kind of the you're the one that's interacting with this giant demon who's controlling the world, right? Kind of thing, and you don't see other people doing it at the same time. But much of it is we designed the quest so if other people are on the same quest but not with you, it explains why they're there. So the story kind of takes that into account. And there's also the conceit at this point, after 25 years of multiplayer adventure MMO type games, that you just kind of expect to see other people around, and they're an opportunity, to trade with, or to group with. We have every zone has 5 or 6 designated areas where there's either a giant boss or an event happens. So you don't have to group with people, but they're too much to do solo. But we do what's called soft grouping, where we do a giant visual effect in the sky, and everyone runs over to it, and you get the bonuses of being in a group just by being in that area with other people. You get experience bonuses, and of course you get to take down a boss and get good loot. So a lot of those game design decisions lead players to be more comfortable in a multiplayer game when they're not used to it, because we're not forcing you to group, but you see other people and you're both fighting the same thing. So in almost every sense of the word, you are grouping. You just don't have to go through the mechanic of right clicking on them and inviting them. So, it's definitely a process to get solo type gamers, and there are very few of them left now, obviously. But back when we started in 2014, there was definitely a huge divide in the game playing public between multiplayer gamers and single player gamers. But we designed ESO to attract Skyrim and Oblivion players, and that was the way that we did it, just through game systems and letting them play much of the game solo. In fact, probably all of the game's questing, overland questing, Skyrim style quests, you can do solo, no problem. Now, when it gets to co-op dungeons and our rating system that we call trials, you definitely have to have a group, but you don't have to do those things either, but you can if you want.
Yeah, I think as a person who mostly plays single player games, and with the multiplayer game I'm playing the most right now, Marvel Rivals, what really pulled me into that was that they really do a good job of giving you the power fantasy of being whatever superhero or
Yeah.
villain that you're playing as. Um, the, Recently I started playing a lot of Storm, and it's real fun. I randomly was on YouTube, saw some short video about you're playing Storm wrong because a lot of people think that she's one of the worst characters in the game. So I was like, okay, let me watch this video. And then the way they explained how everybody is just, the game's only been out for a month. Everybody is just not playing this character the way that the devs might have intended. And he broke it down to where like she flies and everybody flies high up in the air so that it's harder for people to hit them and, do stuff. But the way she works is you're actually not supposed to do that, despite the fact that she can do that. You're actually kind of supposed to be low to the ground and giving everybody around you either a speed boost or a damage boost. So you stay low to the ground. You use the speed boost to get to the point faster. Then you cut on the damage boost so that you and your team can do more damage. And I started playing like that, and I started having way more fun with Storm than I did the one time I played her before, when I played her during like the betas and alphas. And just finding ways to bridge that gap of like, if it's an established IP like Marvel characters, making people, feel, just have fun being their favorite characters, or like you just said, finding ways to bring what makes a single player game like Skyrim so fun, and what makes people want to play that into a multiplayer form, to make those single player people want to come in and have and enjoy that experience with multiple people is very fun, and I can only imagine how difficult that is.
Yeah, well, and don't assume that the game designers actually have all the answers, right? I can tell you from a lot of experience that players know your game far better than you do, and you could stick with Storm the way you want to play Storm, and you might find a very overpowered system that the game designers did not intend for her to do, that you could do, because you don't have to play it the way they intended. And sometimes you can find that it's
like
much better to not play it the way it was intended until they fix it.
like
But
it's for sure a situation where it's like, as even though this is definitely the way it feels like they intended for you to play the character, because I realized now that I'm playing the character like this, it's like everything's working out
yeah,
better. I think everybody who's playing the game agrees, like even if this is what they intended, it doesn't make sense for the character. Like, the reason people aren't liking Storm in comparison to other characters, because like I said, there's a power fantasy wanting to play these characters, and Storm flies and shoots lightning. That is the power
yeah,
fantasy of playing Storm. That is not the main thing she does in this game. So people don't have as much fun playing as her. And a lot of people are saying like, this character needs to be reworked because they just aren't fun. I'm not feeling like Storm while I'm playing this game. Um, and so like, yeah, I imagine she probably will be one of the first characters to get like a major change, because like you said, like the players, like, you don't really you're not really sure 100% what the game's going to be like until people start playing it. And now that people have played Storm, people are realizing like, this character maybe isn't working the way or isn't
yeah,
as fun to play as the devs wanted them to be.
yeah. And obviously, from a game design perspective, what works on a spreadsheet doesn't always work in real life. So, you have to make sure that these systems are all tested, and then you have to react once the game's live to make changes like this when you need to, based on feedback. And we've done that a lot in all of our games.
Yeah, for me, I'm excited to just have this experience of playing this game that a lot of people are playing, talking to people online, and, being part of the discussions, and also, part of like, giving feedback, and, making the game better, because I've never been big into, multiplayer games before. So I'm really excited to just have this experience for the first time in, the now 24 years I've been alive. My birthday was a couple months ago. um, but yeah, I'm curious. We mentioned like what other things outside of video games inspired Dark Age Camelot. I'm curious about that for ESO, but also just in general, like what games you like to play, books you like to read, movies, TV you like to watch, just stuff you like to interact with in general, like some of your favorite things.
Yeah. So I mean, ESO is different from Dark Age of Camelot because ESO was based on a game license,
Mm-hmm.
like specifically. So with that, not only came the cool, lore that comes with Elder Scrolls, but it came with game systems as well. So which we have to respect. So that's all part of the game development process. Um, in terms of what I play and what I do, I do play a lot of games, but I read a lot of books, like a lot of books. So I was a history major in college, and I do a lot of reading weird history type stuff. Which is why I love games like Indiana Jones game, where you basically walk around the world and find cool books to read that explains what's going on. So I read a lot. I read a lot of nonfiction. I did obviously growing up read all the sci-fi and fantasy that I could find, and I grew up in the I guess I started in the late 70s, and so kind of one of the golden ages of sci-fi fantasy was right when I was a teenager. So that was good. In terms of games, I play a wide variety of stuff. I will say my favorite games of all time is Fallout, which I have played. I think I played Fallout 4 alone over 800 hours, and much less 3 and 76. And I play Fallout 1 at least once a year, which is the best. If you want to be an aspiring game designer, you should play Fallout 1 because it is one of the best designed games of all time. Even though it's dated by this point, it's still very, very solid. I love RPGs. I played Baldur's Gate 3, obviously, semi-obsessively last year. I play all of the Bethesda games, and it's not just because I'm part of that game group, but because mostly the games that everyone in Bethesda makes are games that I want to play. And then kind of on the side, I've always been a huge soccer fan, so I love FIFA/EAFC and play that all the time. Although interestingly, looking at it, I was asked this question on a podcast a couple of months ago. I actually play EAFC like an RPG because I only play in manager mode, where you get to tweak every little part of your team and, buy and sell players and try to work on different skills for different players. So it's like each team is 11 players. So it's like you have an 11 character type system. But I do play it like an RPG where, I play in manager mode, which is about assembling a team, and a team is like a party in any fantasy RPG, although there's 11 of them. But in manager mode in FC, you get to actually tweak by buying and selling players and training. You can tweak their attributes and make, if you want to play a certain style, you can actually tweak players and train them to do certain things to be faster or play on the wing. So it's just an interesting thing that I love soccer, but I actually play it on console as if it was an RPG. I rarely play multiplayer. Mostly I play manager mode just so I can set up the perfect team and win the Champions League, which I do pretty much every year. And then I put it aside until the next one comes out. So, yeah, so I play a lot of disparate different types of games.
Yeah, was it the developers of Sifu are making a soccer game called Rematch, which is like a lot of people are comparing it to like where's that game called? They're kind of like soccer type game but with cars, except that it's actually
Rocket League.
Yeah, Rocket League.
Great,
except
a super fun game.
Yeah.
It shows how a very limited, simple rule set can make a very, very deep, very, very fun game. I love that game. I haven't played it in a while, but yeah, I love that game when it came out.
Yeah, well,
Rematch. So, and I also Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, Rematch is like rather than controlling a whole team, it's multiplayer, 5 people on each team. You control your player, the cameras over the shoulder. You control the camera, and you have more control over the single character and their movements. Similar to like Sifu is a martial arts game. Just having more control over a single character. Not the follow up people expected, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, and just like you, I love Hades. So that's probably one of my favorite. That and well, mostly because they're more recent. I'm sure there are others in the past. Like the Fallout games have great storytelling too. But Baldur's Gate 3 and Hades have some of the best storytelling that I've seen in a long time. And Hades is great because it's such a simple game, but it's so compelling because of the characters. You actually want. I mean, the gameplay's fun too. Don't get me wrong, but you really want to see what happens when you advance the story, and so you go back into the. Try to escape Hades one more time just to see what happens, with the different characters. It's a great mechanic, and I love that.
Hades was a game that I didn't think I'd like it. But what pulled me in was it was the characters in the story. I was like, it was the art style. I was like, oh, this it just looks pretty. It's just a good looking game. And then the characters, the story, and the acting just really pulled me in. I was like, okay,
it's so well written. It's so well written.
Yeah. it was on Game Pass at one point, so I played it on Game Pass, and that's when I tried it. I was like, oh, I didn't think I would like this style of gameplay, but I love it, and I love it a lot. And I started playing more games like it afterwards, and like, yeah, I love Hades. Hades is a great game. I'm excited for Hades 2 to come out in full. That'll be a great time.
Yeah, I am purposefully not playing it until it's released because I play enough games before they're released, and it's I'll wait for what they consider to be version 1, and then I'll play that because I want to see what the end result's going to be.
I'm in the same boat. It's like I love Hades as well, but I didn't play the early access of Hades 1, and I think my enjoyment of it was a lot like deeper because I went into it completely blind with a finished product, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. Because I wasn't I didn't think I'd like the gameplay of the first Hades. I wasn't concerned about playing it in early access. But now that I know that I like it and I'm really into it, I couldn't wait. I was just like, I need to play it now. It's from people who have a lot more experience playing games in early access, I've heard that it's like a game in early access that has a lot more in it than a lot of games in early access do. So it's like and like one of the latest updates, one of the things they added completely caught me off guard, and it's I'm be interested to see just how much more they add when the game's actually out, because as the game is now, this could just be the game, and I don't think anyone would be upset. But this isn't just the game. There is so much more left. So it's insane to think that this is not the finished product. That there is a lot.
Yeah, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is obviously super successful, and I think a large part of that was because of its early access program, because it's such an enormously large game that they needed a large amount of people to actually go through it and comment on it and find problems. But I played the first early access version for about an hour, and then I just stopped because I'm like, I do not want to. I want to wait until this is ready. And it was like 2.5 years later finally came out, and I'm glad I waited because it is so much better than it was when it was in early access. And if you guys haven't played that, it's unbelievably good game.
I plan on playing it eventually. I just haven't gotten around to it because I don't want to be playing too many RPGs at once and then tire myself out. But I remember I had heard about that game for so long that the more I saw it, I don't know, I feel like the stuff I saw initially, it was also at a point in time when I didn't like RPGs. So I just didn't think I would be interested in this game at all. And then it came out and everybody was loving it, and I watched people play it. And I actually, earlier when I was making breakfast, I was watching some people play it on YouTube, and all I've seen, and I'm like, yeah, I'll definitely love this game when I get around.
Yeah, if you like Hades and the character development writing in Hades, it has that times 100, with the wrinkle that your interaction with the characters can make them hate you or like you. And so you can just and of course there are, I don't know, 15 different major characters, and basically you can play the game 5 times and have a completely different playthrough just by who likes you and who doesn't, and the decisions you make. Like literally, I don't want to spoil it, but you can make decisions that just basically end the game, or end that act of the game because bad things happen. And it's super freeform. And you have to turn-based combat, but other than that, it's spectacular.
Turn-based combat has grown on me. I used to not like it. It's definitely. We'll have to see when I play it, because I like the style of turn-based combat that the Persona series does. They spice it up. They make it a lot more interesting than I think most turn-based games. But I think I'll be able to enjoy the way Baldur's Gate does it as well. My only fear is that sometimes those battles can take a long time when there's just so many moving pieces and so many enemies to fight. Is that you have to sit there for a minute, but 30 minutes just fighting in one combat encounter. I guess just randomly my mind just thought of just Elden Ring. Have you played Elden Ring?
I have. I would never say that I am an Elden Ring player, but obviously it's a huge RPG style fantasy game. I played it, but I'm past the point where I have anything to prove on beat your head against a rock style game mechanics. So I played it enough to know what they do, and I totally appreciate it. But that's not the style of game that I play anymore these days. Because mostly at this point I'm trying to see what game designers are doing, and you can tell very, very quickly in Elden Ring what they're doing. But the world is unbelievably amazing and detailed, and I love the kind of free form style that you can go through it until you run into a boss and just get your ass kicked over and over again. And that's that is a game style which I used to appreciate, but I don't do that much anymore.
Yeah, Elden Ring is the first FromSoft game I've played. And like I wasn't into any of the other ones because the difficulty definitely turned me off. I think the closest ones I've been interested in is like Bloodborne and Sekiro, and I might go back and check those out eventually. But with Elden Ring, what has kind of made it more palatable for me is that because it's open, you choose where you go. So like you can stay in the easy area and level up until you're strong enough to move on to the next area. But the way I play it, I kind of cheese it a bit where you can kind of just run past a lot of enemies. So I will go to places I am absolutely not strong enough to be in and just run to the nearest checkpoint so I can just fill out the map. Even though I'm not supposed to be there. I made a mistake and got to a boss fight that I saw a lot of people get to that boss fight in a very complicated way, but I kind of just lucked into it because I was just exploring an area that I wasn't necessarily supposed to be in at that point. And yeah, it's really fun to just figure out how that game works.
If you like games like that, because you haven't mentioned this one yet, although not a beat your head against a rock boss style game, but it has some of those mechanics, but with a great story, is Horizon Zero Dawn, which I can't recommend enough because that has kind of the boss fighting mechanics, but they're done in a way that it's much more approachable, and the world is just as compelling, and the story is unbelievably amazing. Yeah. So I love that game.
Unfortunately, I just couldn't get into that game. I tried several times. It just, on paper, it's like, it seemed like the type of game I would like, but I don't know, something about it just didn't do it for me. I'm not really, it's hard for me to really pin down what exactly. I had a very similar thing with Control. Control is a game that looks very fun. And I was like, I thought I'd like it, and I played it, and it was kind of boring to me. And I think Control is a game I think I've tried Horizon again and still didn't like it. So I think I'm kind of done with that one. But yeah, Control I haven't played in a minute, so I might go back to Control and try again.
I played Control all the way through. I'm trying to, it was fun. It held my attention, definitely.
Is there like a dream game that either you'd like to make, and if it's like too close to anything you might make eventually, you don't have to say, but if it's like, if you can't tell us that, you can tell us like a game that like may not be possible anytime soon before you retire or whatever, that you'd love to like see get made or make yourself.
Interesting question. Every person in my position, in fact many people not even in my position, have many games in their heads that they would like to make at some point, and there's not enough time to make all of them. So yeah, I have a bunch of them. Some of them might actually see the light of day at some point, so I don't want to go into too many specifics.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
But I think in general, games like Hades, to go back to that, show kind of what you can do with a smaller team. Obviously, I'm in giant AAA development, making huge, games that are based on, worldwide IP. But there is a niche in the game industry to make games like Hades or smaller, and I'm not using smaller in the bad sense of the word, just smaller team, but just as fun and just as influential type games. And so a lot of the ones in my head are much more like that are like, hey, what could I do with a 20-person team, or what could I do with which is interesting. But most of my attention and time is obviously towards making ESO. It's a live service game, so it continues. And we are working on another game that's unannounced at Zenimax Online right now, which I will not go into.
Yeah, that's why I haven't asked about it, because I was like, I know you can't say anything about that.
Yeah, and that's obviously taking a lot of my mental space right now. So we'll release information on that when it's ready to be released.
Yeah. I guess I haven't brought it up this episode. I've talked about it plenty on the podcast in general and I've talked to you about it. just off the podcast about, I want to, work in the game industry eventually. Currently, I'm a graphic designer. And uh, I guess in my mind, currently, the game I want to make is a game similar to the very first, or the first two Metal Gear games, the kind of like um, more pixel art, like what is it called? Um, Isometric stealth game that those games are. I have a very interesting idea for a concept like that I think that when I get around to it, that'll be the first game I make. Um,
You should do it. I mean, the barrier to entry to game development is so low now. It's the lowest it's been since I started, when it was just text. But with Unity and other game engines that are out there, if you get 4 or 5 people together, that know what they're doing, like engineer, graphic designer, art, animator, you can actually make really, really good things. And a lot of cool ideas are coming out of, indie studios like what that make games like that. And a lot of the AAA developers play a lot of indie games just to see, because the thinking, with AAA, we have a market that we're hitting, and we know, what the market is, especially with an Elder Scrolls game, right? I know kind of what we're doing for the next year or 2 years. But with indie stuff, you can do anything, and just to see some kind of cool ideas. Maybe the game isn't that good, but the idea at the heart of it is fantastic, right? There's always that out there, and if you just browse through Steam every day, there's I don't know, dozens of games every day that are launching, and some of them are pretty interesting and far better than and deserve to do a lot better than they do. But it's again, there's only so much attention that I can give any game per day. So, but just know that a lot of game developers and publishers look through a lot of different types of games just to kind of get inspiration and see what other people are thinking.
I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to ask you about indie games and kind of just how much they've grown over the like last decade and kind of like how they've taken the world by storm. There's so many of them, like you said. It's kind of hard. It's hard to play them all because there's so many of them because there's so many people kind of just cutting their teeth making their first games and creating very interesting systems that catch people's eye because it's very different from what any of the AAA devs are doing. I feel like that's their strength is that
Yep.
they have the ability to do a lot of new and different things because not as much is at stake with them. So they're able to just do whatever and catch people's eye because they did some very interesting mechanic that maybe no one's thought of, or something that I love that indie games do is doing things that just haven't been done in a long time. That sometimes um, the industry moves on from certain styles of gameplay because they perceive them to be old and just outdated, whereas maybe you can still evolve that style of gameplay in a way that still works in modern day. I think like there's a lot of like survival horror fixed camera games that are being made. I grew up playing God of War games from the PS2 and PS3,
Yep.
so I played a lot of fixed camera games growing up. So I have a good time playing those. Like Metal Gear Solid, my favorite video game franchise of all time. The first one I played was 4. So recently, when they released the Master Collection, I played the very first Metal Gear for the first time. Despite the fact it's a PS1 game, came out was it 3 years or 4 years before I was born. It's like that style of gameplay is still that game just holds up well. It's a good game. It's a great game. I always encourage people to play Metal Gear. I got Aiara to start playing it. And
I have not played that, so
you should definitely check out Mass Collection. Play the first Metal Gear. It's a great game.
All right, you play Fallout 1, and I'll play the first Metal Gear.
That's fair. It's fair exchange. And not too long ago, I watched like some YouTube doc about the creation of the Fallout series, and I didn't realize that that's where it started. That the game started out that way because we're used to what Fallout 3 is. That I didn't realize that it wasn't always like that.
Oh no. The first 2 were made by the Black Isle, and but they're 2 is its own special thing, but Fallout 1 is bite-sized and amazing storytelling, and I can't speak highly of it enough.
So, being someone who takes inspiration from indie games, how do you see indie games kind of affecting AAA development?
Well, I mean, like I said, the barrier to entry is very low now because with game engines that are readily accessible that you can start developing on for free, right? It's just changed everything. So, I mean, it's the game industry is changing because there are so many games out there now, and AAA has its thing, and live service games have its thing. So that's my niche. And then, but indie games, a lot of the creative spark, like out of the box thinking, comes from that now. Like Hades was just, I mean, I don't know if there are any totally new radical ideas in Hades, but putting that package together in that way was totally different and amazing.
I think
And
Hades is an example of them taking something old and kind of making it new
yeah,
again, because
well, it was
roguelikes were kind of
yeah, but
like
it was
existed a long time ago.
roguelike with an RPG system,
Yeah.
with a character development, a character-based NPC system that made you want to continue, plus a death mechanic which no one has ever used or that I know of in many, many, many years, plus Greek myths, right? It's like that's a compelling package, and it's like, but just no one had done it before, and you know, ideas are a dime a dozen, but the production value on that game is so fantastic that they put it together and it works.
So, as someone wanting to get into industry, I since my strengths lie in graphic design, I think that like UI UX may be the way I kind of like break into industry. I wanted to learn more about like how does someone in your position, like how do you work with the UI UX team? Like what is your, like how do you interact with them? What is your process of working with that team?
So yeah, as a studio head, like let me go back 10 years or 15 years and answer that question, because now I'm the head of the studio and I got two giant games in production, and um, I rely on people to do those for me, and I see the results and I can comment on them or not. But back when ESO was in development, um, basically it's looking at how we expect players to interact with the game. And ESO originally was a non-console mouse and keyboard game, which was right in my wheelhouse. And of course, we had this utterly insane, 2005, 6, 7 MMO style mouse and keyboard system, which you need basically you need to learn tab targeting and everything. And that obviously would have limited ESO's reach, because there are a lot of people that love to play that game, but there are a lot of console gamers that don't want to play that game. So we decided to make a console version and thus bring the controller system from that to PC. So we have two different completely UX systems in ESO. And we put a lot more thought, because the mouse and keyboard system in ESO led to a certain UI layout that people would have been familiar with from World of Warcraft and Dark Age of Camelot, EverQuest, and Star Wars: The Old Republic, right? But the console gamers that played ESO did not have any of that context, and so we went with if you want to play ESO on console, you're probably going to have been a Skyrim player at some point. So we approached that from let's imagine you're a Skyrim player and you're sitting down to ESO for the first time. What should it look like? And so if you play ESO with a controller, and you can now, of course, just turn on your controller on PC, and your UI immediately switches in ESO over to controller, and you turn it off and it goes back to mouse and keyboard. And so you can see the two systems, basically side by side, and you can tell one is much older school and much more modifiable, and one is much more simple to look at, and it buries a lot of the complexity into submenus. And those are the decisions that UI UX people make when designing, systems for these really complex games. But I would say if you want to get a good primer on good UI UX, look at more simple games to start with that bury complexity in really good looking and well performing UI. And Hades is a great example of that. I hate to keep going back to that, but you can do a lot of things with those 8 buttons in Hades, with combinations, and but they don't force it on you all at once, right? You start out with one weapon and you hit one button, and then you can do a bunch of different game mechanics with it, but they don't force it on you all at once. You go through a process for learning how this works, and you get through all of the different permutations of that weapon, and then they open up the system where you can learn new weapons, and then you learn the second weapon, right? And all of that is totally done on purpose to make sure that you're not being overloaded at one time with too many options. And that is the heart of UX design, is that.
When me and Aiara were talking about Hades before we started recording, we were talking about the difference between one of the weapons, how it controls, and on controller and on mouse and keyboard, and how Aiara plays the game mostly mouse and keyboard. I play with controller even when I'm playing Hades 2 on my on the laptop that I'm recording with right now. I use my PlayStation controller, and there's the bow in the first Hades. For a lot of people, it's easier to use that on mouse and keyboard. And because of that, I didn't use the bow a lot initially, but recently I started like getting the hang of it on controller. So I like the bow is now one of my favorite weapons. But from what it seems like, most people feel like the bow on controller like isn't great, so they don't use it. So like I definitely see the difference between that, especially when I started playing Hades 2 with mouse keyboard because this was my first time really playing a game like that. And I went back to controller because it was just there's a bit of learning curve there that I haven't gotten past just yet. And like seeing the way the UI subtly shifts, and the mouse cursor being on screen and having to click around the move it's very interesting, very different.
I play with controller. Sorry, Laura.
No, you're good. You're good. I think my favorite thing about Hades' UI and like UX is that like it, unlike most games that I've played like over the years, like it never goes away. Like it'll always like what I mean by that is like what each button does, what the function of certain items are. It's like it's a constant tutorial, but it's not in your face all the time. It's like if I haven't played Hades 1 in a long time, but if I were to like pick it back up today or tomorrow, I could jump right back in because the UX is designed in such a way that it's like, hey, did you forget what this thing does? Here it is. Not like super in your face and like I don't know. I just really always like that about Hades, and I wish more games would like go down that avenue of having like those refreshers, but not having them be so like this is the set tutorial zone and like having it be so separate from the main game. I feel like Hades' solution to that is very elegant, and it would be nice to see more of that in more games, honestly.
Yeah, I mean they put a lot of thought into it, but it is a simpler game in that sense. So they can do things like that and make it just sing. Obviously, when you get to things like MMOs and giant online RPGs, and there's so many options that you have to open it up a little more, and it gets more and more complicated. But we try to hide the complexity as much as possible.
Yeah, I never really looked at Hades like that. You're right that like because like the tutorial is Tartarus, but you always go through Tartarus. So every time you go back to play the game, you go through the tutorial again. So you always get that refresher of how to play the game. Even if you play the game like 2 years later, you hop back into it for the first time in 2 years, you're essentially gonna be playing the tutorial again. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's
whenever you get a new act, whenever you open up a new weapon, you go back to Tartarus, right? Yeah. And it's easier, and you can learn there before you get thrown into the hard stuff.
Yeah. So to wrap this up, I did want to ask, like, I mentioned dream game to make. Just like, what is like the dream game to play? Like, I have one where like I love stealth games. But I also like just above stealth games, and like my favorite like game mechanics or like genres is like I like hack and slashes, like God of War. I like Devil May Cry. And for me, the ideal game would be a game that somehow perfectly blends both. A lot of games try, but it's hard to do because they're opposites in a lot of ways. It's hard to make those two things work together. I think a game that seems like it's coming close to doing that is Assassin's Creed Shadows, which comes out in February. It was supposed to come out a couple of months back, but it got delayed. Which the more I see of it, I'm like, it's looking better. So it got delayed for a reason. I'm getting real excited for it. Even though I wish I could have been playing it right now, I'm excited to see what it looks like when it's finished. And for me, like, I mean, really, I feel like the ideal games come out soon with that game. But for me, it's like, yeah, an open world stealth game that kind of like perfectly balances stealth and character action gameplay. Um, and instead of expanding the map outwards, which I think maps in games are big enough. We don't need to get bigger. Instead, have a relatively small map, but have more vertical space. I feel like the Dishonored games do that, where it's like they're not open world games, but there are areas that are slightly more open than others, and there's a lot of verticality in those maps for you to get above enemies and hide and sneak past, and having working more in more vertical space and internal space, and being able to go inside of more buildings and climb on top of more buildings, and incorporating the parkour of Assassin's Creed with like the stealth of like Metal Gear Solid 5 and the combat of something like Ghost of Tsushima would be like my ideal game. If you could like Frankenstein the ideal game together like that, like what would be your perfect game? And you can go as well here.
Except for the combat, what the game you just described is very much Indiana Jones, which is pretty funny, right? A small map, but lots of verticality and secrets, and you can't have to go back once you find something to unlock an area in the same area you just were, and you find there's a whole catacomb underneath it, right? I honestly don't know if I have that in my head because I played so many games over the years, and I'm constantly surprised when I play new games about things that I've never thought about or never thought about doing. So I think the perfect, I'm very much a story and world type virtual, not, well, in ESO it turns into virtual world, but I'm very much give me a space that makes sense, that has lore and rules that make sense, and then tell a great story inside that world, and make me want to explore that giant map. Don't just give me a giant map. Like, make me want to actually go out and look. And to me, that's Fallout, Horizon Zero Dawn, Elder Scrolls games. Like, the going around the map is not the chore. That's the game, and that's the kind of game that I gravitate towards.
Red Dead is that for me in terms of just make me want to go out and explore the map.
I haven't played that nearly as much as I should, but yes, I would put that in that genre.
Yeah, how about you, Aiara?
I think for me, my ideal game to play is it's not complicated, but it's like and I'm having the same issue as you, Dijon, where it's like a genre mashup that would be really hard to do, but I think it would be really fun. Like, I want to see a survival horror game with like RPG-esque elements where it's like your character gradually gets better over the course of the game. Not just because like your skill level increases as a player, but there's actual like elements, because it's like being put in a survival horror situation. Yes, you'd probably start off kind of like trash, the limited inventory, the low stamina and all that. But over the course of like the experience or whatever, like Silent Hill or whatever you're thrown into, I feel like there would be room for like, a person to improve under those like stressful situations. And I think that would be really, really fun.
I think that the closest games to that are like the Evil Within does a lot of that, where it's like there are ways that you upgrade across the course of the game. And there's like a whole upgrade menu, but also Parasite Eve has a lot of RPG gameplay mechanics. It has this kind of like almost like the current Final Fantasy VII Remake games, the way they do the ATB system where you can slow down time and choose between attacks. Parasite Eve, which was, I think it was a PS1 game. This is a survival horror game that does something similar to that. But like, I see what you're saying, and that could be interesting. A survival horror RPG. Are you imagining the combat is the way that it usually is, or is it different?
Specifically, the game I had in mind was Signalis, which I've been playing the hell out of recently. But it's like, if you took like Signalis's combat system, which is very like stop and shoot, which I really, really enjoy for a survival horror game. It's like, if you took that and then like added kind of like what Parasite Eve does, and just like, I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, like a fixed camera taking control survival horror with RPG elements.
RPG elements, yeah.
That's pretty fun.
Not a survival horror, but I did play a horror game with like RPG elements. It was called it was a long time ago called like Liar Genie in Crucifix Kingdom. It was like an indie game made an RPG Maker, and there like the system there was like you could equip any item and it would like affect your stats, but of course some things would affect your stats more or less than other things, and I thought that was a really sophisticated system. It was super complicated in Liar Genie, but it had potential, and I had never seen anything like it before, so seeing something like that also I think would be really cool.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking to you. This is an episode of the podcast I didn't think would ever happen. Me and Aiara work for Wide Angle, for everyone listening. We mentioned it briefly before, but we've not talked about it before. And our boss, Susan Malone, has connections that we just never expected to have. So one day she said, like, yeah, there are going to be some people coming in to check out the office in Wide Angle, and they're from Zenimax. And I said, and I heard Zenimax, I was like, Zenimax, that's like the company that Bethesda's under, the game studio whose games that I love. That can't be. And then she's like, yeah, some people like that's pretty high up in the company are going to be here. And I was like, yes, absolutely, I will be the person to present to them. And then we met you and Jared. And we met with Jared a few weeks ago, and just talked about game design, and he gave us a lot of really great advice about breaking into the industry. And then of course we talked to you. I think we talked to you like literally the day before we talked to him or something like that, about setting up this podcast. And this was a fantastic opportunity. I'm glad you were able to make it. To our little podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. I mean, it's always good to talk about industry type stuff to a new audience that maybe doesn't hear game stuff from my perspective. And if you haven't had Jared on the podcast, he would be a great guest because he's been around in the industry as long as I have, and he's got a lot more tactical view of game development than I do at this point. And he's super talented and a wealth of information and advice. So you should definitely get him on here.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have. If you don't have anything, Aiara.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, me neither.
Cool. Well, I'm Dijon. You can find my at above me. Aiara's at is above them, and if Matt, if you want any like ads on the screen, we'll put that up on the screen as well. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel if you want to see more storytelling content, and to click notification bell so that you're notified when we post. Peace.
See ya.
Bye-bye.